Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Torah is for Everyone. And tonight we're going to be looking at Chayei Sarah, which is a wonderful portion. I've spoken on it several times, and I'm looking forward to reading it with you and to hearing your perspective on what you see. Because remember, what we're looking at here is not what people say about the Torah, about what the Torah says for itself. And this is really, really important. So let me share the screen and let us begin. So we're beginning in Genesis 23, Chayei Sarah. And it says Sarah's lifetime, the span of Sarah's life, came to 127 years. So we know just from this, remember, she was 90 years old when she had Isaac. Now she's 127 years old. And we get the idea that this happened right after the binding of Isaac, because Isaac would have been then 37 years old when this happened. So Sarah would have heard about Abram taking her only son and making an offering to offer him. And she couldn't understand what was going on. And the rabbis say she had a heart attack and died. And the next thing is she dies in Kiryat Arba, which is now Hebron in the land of Canaan. And Abraham proceeded to mourn for Sarah and to bewail her. Today, Hebron is the center of three religions. And you know, if we look around this burial plot, this cave of Machpelah, we see that it's recorded in the three largest religions today. But I'm going to continue a little later on, because we'll read what Abraham had to do to obtain this cave of Machpelah. Then Abram rose from beside his dead, and he spoke to the Hittites, saying, I am a resident alien. In other words, he was a stranger among you. And the reason he was a stranger among them is because he had his God, and the Hittites had many gods. Sell me a burial site among you, that I may remove my dead for burial. And the Hittites replied to Abraham, saying to him, Hear us, my Lord. Here it says you are elect of God among us, but the word in Hebrew is nisi, which is prince. It's like you're a prince of God among us. They understood that he had a very special relationship with his God. Bury your dead in the choicest of our burial places. None of us will withhold his burial place from you for burying your dead. So Abraham bowed low to the land-owning citizens, the Hittites, and he said to them, If it is indeed your wish that I remove my dead for burial, you must agree to intercede for me with Ephron, son of Zoar. Let him sell me the cave of Machpelah that he owns, which is at the edge of his land. Let him sell it to me. The word is actually give it to me, noten. Let him give it to me. And here it's very clear. He's saying at the full price. He's not looking for a bargain. He's willing to pay whatever it took for a burial site in your midst. Ephron was present among the Hittites. So Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the Hittites at the assembly at the town gate. Remember, all these meetings would always take place at the town gate. It must have been a meeting place for people at that time. Maybe it was like the local town hall. So Ephron was listening, and he answered Abraham, and he said, No, my Lord, hear me. I give you the field. I give you the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of my people. Go and bury your dead. But Abraham bowed low before the land-owning citizens. And he spoke to Ephron in the hearing of all those citizens who own property, saying, If only you would hear me out. Let me pay the price of the land. Accept it from me, that I may bury my dead there. And Ephron replied to Abraham, saying to him, My Lord, hear me out. Do hear me. What's a piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver? What is that between you and me? Go and bury your dead. So here, this is the negotiation of that time. He told Abraham very clearly how much the land, this piece of property was worth, 400 shekels of silver. Abraham accepted Ephron's terms, and Abraham paid out to Ephron the money that he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver at the going merchant's rate. Now, this is really important because we hear Abraham asking for the full cost of the land with the cave in Hebron to bury Sarah. He knew he would need witnesses aside from the written contract, which was signed. It's also recorded in the Torah, which we know is the root of the three largest religions today, which are Rabbinic Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So in those three religions, this is recorded. So there can be no argument from them except if they insist that the written Torah of Moses had been replaced with the New Testament and the Quran and all the extra writings like the Talmud, as each sect sees fit.
I was reading somewhere that some man working would make 2 to 4 shekels a year. That means if some man would have had to work for 100 years to attain that price.
Amazing. But we know Abraham was wealthy, and he had to let all the people know who were there that he bought it. Excuse me. And even though it's bought and paid for, today that is not what they believe, because the three religions claim it as their own. If you go there, you'll see Christians visiting, you'll see Orthodox Jews visiting the cave of Machpelah, and you'll see the Muslims visiting it, and they all claim it to be theirs.
I also may have come across that they built a mosque over it.
They have built a whole building over it. Yes, you'll see.
I understand Abraham, according to Judaism and Islam, and the Christians. Why do they? Why do they revere like Abraham as much? Just question.
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
I see the Jews. Abraham is like the father of the Jews. Abraham is like, for the Islam, the father of the Islam, and the Christians. How does that come to Christians as much?
Well, the New Testament and the Quran are both taken from the Torah. That was the Torah is the source for all these religions, but in their extra books, they've changed much of it in it so that they could promote their ideologies. But that's why, and it also says Abraham would be the father of many, many, many nations. But Abraham understood the nature of the people, and he didn't trust them because pagan religions follow their own rules. Believe it or not, Christianity follows another God. The God of the Christians is Jesus Christ. It has nothing to do with the Torah. The God of Islam and their extra writings has nothing to do with the God of Abraham, God of the Torah. They have made their own gods. And here the Hittites had many gods, and they follow their own rules. One of them is not keeping their word. Lying is almost a good thing. Lying is well known. So, and it would have been very hard for Abraham to trust these people, which was why he had to let them know that in front of everybody that this was he was purchasing it, because later on we see how the Hittites have become our enemies. It would have been very easy to go back on their word and take back the cave of Machpelah, which is what they're doing today. You know, it was not the Hittite religion was not a good match for our people and who had just the one God. Later, we will be told in the Torah that no covenant should be made with other nations in which we give them our sons or daughters. We are not to intermarry with pagan religions. We have to keep to those who believe in the one God, the way Abraham did. And later on, we'll see, even we talked about it before, how Ruth, who was a Moabite, she later turned to Naomi and said, "My God is your God." She became part of our people, which is what the Torah is telling us. So today, Hebron is shared by these three religions, and it isn't always safe for Jews to travel there on their own, even though it does belong to us. So let's continue to read. But that's very interesting about what the value of the shekels were, because that would have been a fortune today, then and it is today. So Ephron's land in Machpelah near Mamre, the field with its cave and all the trees anywhere within the confines of that field passed to Abraham as his possession. When people say we are occupying that land, we're not occupiers. This was given to us by God, and we bought it. We've paid for every piece of land that we have right now. This goes way back in the presence of the Hittites of the assembly in the town gate. Then Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave in the field of Machpelah, facing Mamre, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So the field with its cave passed from the Hittites to Abraham as a burial site. Abraham was now old, advanced in years, and Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, God Adonai, had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said to the senior servant of his household, who had charge of all that he owned, "Put your hand under my thigh." This was a practice in those days of showing trust. "And I will make you swear by Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Adonai, the God of heaven, and the God of the earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from among the daughters of the Canaanites." Again, we are not allowed to intermarry with pagans, among who I dwell. Yes, Richard.
Yeah, about what you just said about putting your hand
Under the thigh.
Yeah, well, that's where the word testify comes from. You know, for men it was touching their
Testicles.
private part, and that's where that comes from.
Interesting. That's very true. He put his hand right there under his.
On the thigh near the crotch.
Yes, right where, because that's from there where the seed comes
Right,
from.
exactly. I was just going to say.
And exactly, all about life. That's a very important part of the male, and it represented their offspring. But thank you for letting me know about that. Testify, because I didn't know that. That's excellent. Okay, do not take a wife from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell, but go to the land of my birth and get a wife for my son Isaac. At least there, he knew who he was dealing with, even though they were not followers of the God of Abraham. They knew, because Abraham left there. So he knew well the customs. And the servant said to him, "What if the woman does not consent to follow me to this land?" Shall I then take your son back to the land from which you came? And Abraham answered him, on no account must you take my son back there. It's easy for us to fall back into old ways. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from my native land, who promised me on oath, he made a vow, saying, I will assign this land to your offspring. He will send a messenger before you, and you will get a wife for my son from there. It was a prophecy. The messenger must be a malach. Yeah, it's a malach, an angel. And if the woman doesn't consent to follow you, you shall then be clear of this oath to me, but do not take my son back there. So the servant put his hand under the testes of his master Abraham and swore to him as he was bidden. Then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and set out. He didn't set out alone. If there are 10 camels, there would have been 10 men and maybe a whole entourage who set out, taking with him all the bounty of his master. He sent him out with a lot of wealth and gifts. And he made his way to Aram Naharaim, to the city of Nahor. Naharaim comes from Nahor. He made the camels kneel down by the well outside the city at evening time, the time when the women came out to draw water, because it was very hot in the middle of the day. And he said, look what the servant said. He knew how to pronounce Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Oh, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yahweh, Jehovah, whatever it was, God of my master Abraham, grant me good fortune today. So he knew Abraham's God. He had left with him. He was part of the household. He was part of the believing community. And deal graciously with my master Abraham. Here I stand by the well, as the daughters of the townspeople come out to draw water. And look what he's asking for here. Remember, right from the beginning, at the beginning of Genesis, it says God created signs, the seasons. Here he's asking for a sign. That's a very big thing among Jewish people, and it comes right from our Torah, always looking for signs. Here's what he says. Let the young maiden, the young woman, to whom I say, and the word there, I think, is na'ar. There were 3 words for virgins. Na'ar is a young woman who had never slept with a man before. Let the maiden to whom I say, please lower your jar that I may drink. And if she replies, drink, I will also water your camels. Let her be the one whom you have decreed for your servant Isaac. Thereby I will know that you have dealt graciously with my master. And he scarcely finished speaking when Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, came out with her jar on her shoulder. The young woman was very beautiful, and she was a virgin, no man having known her. And here she's called a Betula. See, there are different words for virgin, and here it's a Betula, no man having known her. The other one was a young maiden who hadn't had her period yet. She went down to the spring and filled her jar and came up. The servant ran toward her and said, please let me sip a little water from your jar. But before I continue, I want to go back to this idea of signs. Notice that although his servant, first I want to say something else before signs. The servant acknowledges the reality of Abraham's God and speaks to him without question. But can he trust him or not? Right after his request was fulfilled to the exact words, he still doubted, because look what it says here. Drink, my lord. And she quickly lowered her jar upon her hand and let him drink. When she had let him drink his fill, she said, I will also draw for your camels until they finished exactly what he had asked for. So quickly emptying her jar into the trough, she ran back to the well to draw, and she drew for all his camels. Now we already read that she had 10, that he came with 10 camels. That's a lot of work. She must have been so strong. She must have been a woman who was not afraid of hard work. The man, meanwhile, stood gazing at her, silently wondering whether God had made his errand successful or not. Here it was. She answered exactly what he had asked for, and he's still wondering. See, it's one thing to believe in God and another thing to trust him. And on that note, I'm just going to diverge a little bit, because it reminded me when I read about signs. Signs were given to us in the first chapter of Bereshit. Rav Shaul said that Jews look for signs and Greeks or Gentiles seek knowledge. I know that I'm always looking for a sign, and many people in the scriptures look for signs, and the first one that came to me was Gideon. So I want to go just for a moment to the book of Judges. And let me see if I can share with the book of Judges. Where are you? Here. Okay. Can you see this? Judges 6?
Yeah.
Okay. Look what this is really, really important. I want you to listen to this, because this is telling us a lot about the nature of our people. I'm going to read from the beginning. Then the Israelites did what was offensive to God. The Israelites did what was offensive to God, and God delivered them into the hands of the Midianites for 7 years. Throughout our history, before Hanukkah, Israel did what was offensive to God. Before every attack upon our people, the Israelites did what was offensive to God, and we don't want to hear that even till today. Look what it says here. The hand of the Midianites prevailed over Israel. And because of Midian, now Midian was the family of Moses. He married a Midianite. So it was all in the family. But because of the Midian, the Israelites provided themselves with refuge in caves and strongholds of the mountains. So they had to protect themselves against the Midianites. After the Israelites had done their sowing, meaning the seeds they had planted and they were sowing, Midian, Amalek, another enemy of Israel, and the Kedemites would come up and raid them. They would attack them, destroy the produce of the land all the way to Gaza, and leave no means of sustenance in Israel, not a sheep or an ox or a donkey. Look what they've just done last October. And all through these past years, how they're constantly sending in firebombs from Gaza, destroying the produce of the land. Still happening today.
I have a question, Peggy.
Yes, Jer.
You may or not want to address it right now.
Okay.
It seems that human destiny is filled with wars and people combating one or another. You can comment on that. I'm not going to go further with that.
Well, it seems to be our nature, because if we look right at the first two sons of Abraham, of Adam and Eve, Cain murdered his brother over jealousy. So we spoke about it before, how within us we have this tendency to allow the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination that is within us, to win over the Yetzer Hatov, the good inclination. But those who follow Abraham, the God of Abraham, those who follow what is written in our book, can overcome the evil inclination. It's up to us. God gave us free will, and he gave us choice, and he says, choose life.
Yes, but as you mentioned, it's part of our nature, or part of our nature is that we have what, let's say, an evil inclination and a godly inclination, and we could say we might have like can also further or less, we might have an animal type soul or a godly type soul, and or a godly type soul, and perhaps they're always combating each other, and hopefully the godly soul will win over the evil soul. And that's something, that's a struggle that we're presented with.
Exactly. And each of us, it's as if we have within us, I heard this story of a bad dog, a black dog and a white dog living within us. And they're always combating. And the one who wins is the one we feed more. If we feed ourselves with hatred and things that go against the 10 commandments that God has given us, then we will live on the wrong side. We will feed the black dog. But we live with the principles of the Torah, and we act upon them, not just read them. And like I said before, Rav Shaul says, the Greeks look for knowledge. We don't only want to build up knowledge and become so puffed up with our knowledge. We want to live the righteous principles of the Torah.
Another important aspect on this, I'm just going to mention now, it just fits in.
Yes.
If you want to love someone, because you just mentioned feed, if you want someone to love them, to love you, if you feed them with your love, you have a greater chance that they'll return your love to you.
And what is that love? What does that look like?
Loving kindness is a basic term, and you can explain more.
It's behavior. Are we loyal to them? Do we keep our word? Can they trust us? Especially a woman. Once a woman loses the trust of the man who says he loves her because he never keeps his word, because he says one thing and does another, or vice versa, that it has a lot to do with, in Hebrew, the word for love is means loyalty. If a person is loyal and you know that you can trust them and they have your back, that the love will grow. But if you're always disappointing the other person and they can no longer trust you, you've lost that love. So it's more than just a feeling that today is called Hollywood love doesn't mean anything. More often than not, it's just lust. What has to do with two people learning to grow together and learning how to trust each other. Does that make sense?
Yes, and there's a poets that write about it, that as much as we love, you have to respect the other person in your togetherness and in respect their individuality as well.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, that's another lifetimes of challenges.
Exactly. So, but here,
Just a comment on, you know, what you're saying about the Yetzer Hara, the Yetzer Tov, whatever. Like like really the times, well, I remember, I think the rabbi said this too, Rabbi Percy, that when we really have free will, it's as believers, because when you know that obeying God is really the ultimate choice we make, and whether we're, you know, when you say that we have the bad inclination, like when you're saying the wars, Jerry, you're commenting on wars everywhere and that being in our nature. If I understood you, you know, that evil part of our nature. But I think that when you want to follow God, you still have the the evil inclination in the sense that you'll often make wrong choices, but you always know that behind every decision you make, you have to weigh it in the light of God. But when you
Yes.
don't have God, there isn't a strict moral code about things. You
Right,
know,
the-
like there.
Absolutely right, Miriam.
Yeah, Miriam, I'd like to not make that as a statement that our legacy or destiny is fighting, and even I'd like to just present that as an observation, but not a statement. That maybe
No, I understood that, Jerry. All I'm saying is without God, there are no limits. You know, like the way a lot of things are going in the world now, it's almost like morality, there's very little limits. It's as long as it doesn't hurt you and you don't hurt the other person, supposedly. But there's so many things that we wouldn't have even thought of doing, even like 20 years ago, whatever. You know, now it's like, well, let's explore this. Look, there's so many things that cross boundaries we wouldn't have thought of crossing before. It's
Right.
it's just
and the greatest sin during Noah's time was the sin of immorality. I came across.
Exactly. And as we're going to read here, is with with last week we read about Sodom and Gomorrah. There was so much immorality in Sodom that God said he would destroy it. So, but basically I'm going to come back to here because everybody, you can go back and read Judges on your own. Judges chapter 6, you'll see that Israel was in a bad place, and God called upon Gideon to go and fight against the enemies, and he was just a very small tribe, but he asked for a sign, and the sign was it's called Gideon's fleece. So that's what I was talking about here. I was just comparing the sign that the servant asked for, and it was fulfilled exactly.
Did
So
you say
here,
it in fleece?
yes,
Could you
if you
expound
go,
on that touch if you have time permitting? No.
yeah, do you want to hear that? Sure. Let me go back here and I'll share it again, so I'll show it to you. In Judges 6, can you see I'm back in Judges? Let me go here. It says, the angel of God appeared to him, meaning Gideon, and said, God is with you, valiant warrior. Gideon said to him, please, my Lord, if God is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are those wondrous deeds about which our ancestors told us, saying, truly God brought us up from Egypt. Now God has abandoned us and delivered us into the hands of the Midian. And God turned to him and said, go in this strength of yours and deliver Israel from the Midianites. I herewith make you my messenger. And he said to him, please, my sovereign, how can I deliver Israel? My clan is the humblest, the smallest in Manasseh, and I'm the youngest in my father's household. God replied, I will be with you, and you shall defeat Midian at once. And he said to him, if I have gained your favor, give me a sign that it's you who are speaking to me. Do not leave this place until I come back to you and bring up my offering and place it before you. And he answered, I will stay until you return. So Gideon went in, prepared a kid, unleavened bread. He put meat in the basket, poured broth into a pot. This is very similar to what Abraham did to the 3 men who came to visit him before they went to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And he brought them out to him, the messenger, under the terebinth, and he presented him. The angel of God said to him, take the meat, the unleavened bread, put them on yonder rock, and spill out the broth. He did so. And the angel of God held out the staff that he carried and touched the meat and the unleavened bread with its tip. A fire sprang up from the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened bread, and the angel vanished from his sight. Then Gideon realized that it indeed was an angel of God. And Gideon said, oh, my sovereign God, I have seen an angel of God face to face. But God said to him, all is well. Have no fear, you shall not die. So Gideon built an altar and called it Adonai Shalom. To this day, it stands in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. That night, God said to him, take a young bull belonging to your father. And let me continue down here because I want you to see what Gideon said. So here Gideon is afraid. All Midianite is going to come. All these people are going to come against him. Here, Gideon said to God, if you really intend to deliver Israel through me, as you have said, here I place a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If dew falls only on the fleece and all the ground around it remains dry, I will know that you will deliver Israel through me, as you have said. It's exactly what happened. Early the next day, he squeezed the fleece, wrung out the dew from the fleece, a bowl full of water. Then Gideon said to God, don't be angry with me if I speak just once more. One more test with the fleece. This time, let the fleece be dry while there's dew all around on the ground. God did so that night. Only the fleece was dry, while there was dew over the ground. And then he goes ahead because at this point he knows that this is what God is doing. And here, this servant does exactly the same. He prayed, his answer was directly answered. What he said was directly answered, but he was still a little bit afraid that maybe this wasn't true. How often does that happen to us?
I was just going to say that sometimes, like, I know I'll look at somebody else and I'll say, wow, they believe, they have such a strong faith or whatever, and they believe blah, blah, blah. But we don't know what each person goes through, because look at this.
Yeah.
This man who's written in the scriptures about,
Yeah.
and he has all these signs, and he said, show me if it's really you that I'm meeting, or this, that's really
Yeah.
a servant of God. Like after these all this series of extremely fantastical experiences and displays of God. And he
Yeah.
still says, I need a sign, and I need another sign. And he says,
Yeah.
pardon me if I speak again. Like, I'm always shocked when I read these things, like, because
I
that's
know.
so much like our own life.
Right. And I
Exact-
came across a story
Yeah.
with getting the golden fleece, and I never saw. So I'm not sure this is related to it, but so that's why when you mentioned fleece, is the first time I saw some relation to that. Somebody's going after a golden fleece.
This is not a golden fleece. That's a mythology. That's in Greek mythology, the golden fleece.
Okay, thank you. You straightened that out for us.
This is a fleece of sheep, a sheep.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, it was part of the offering. He took the fleece. When the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold nose ring. Whenever you see a nose ring in a young girl today, you can tell her that Mazel Tov, you're engaged. Weighing a half shekel, and 2 gold bands for her arms, 10 shekels of weight. Imagine. Tell me, whose daughter are you? Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? And she replied, I am daughter of Betuel, son of Milcah, to whom she bore Nahor. And then she went on, there's plenty of straw and feed at home, and also room to spend the night. The man bowed low in homage to God. He knew. Blessed, and he said, blessed be the God, Yud He Vav He, Adonai, the God of my master Abraham, who has not withheld steadfast faithfulness from my master. For I have been guided on my errand by God to the house of my master's kin. We have to constantly remember when these things happen. Thank God, thank God. The maiden ran, the Betula, and here's back to Na'ar. The young maiden ran and told all this to her mother's household. Isn't that interesting? Because the women would have they had their own tents, their own places. She ran back to tell her mother what was going on.
Yeah, I was reading somewhere, Peggy, that
Yeah.
not only was Rebecca a virgin, she didn't engage in any joking around with men, so to speak.
I mean, I don't know. It's not here.
No, it's not.
I doubt that. I doubt it because I don't think that in the, I don't know. She's just seemed to be, well, she certainly didn't fool around before she got married. That's very clear here. Now, Rebecca had a brother whose name was Laban. In Hebrew, Lavan, which means white. And later on, we're going to find out that his character was not so white. God has a sense of humor. Lavan ran out to the man at the spring, and when he saw the nose ring and the band on his sister's arms, when he heard his sister Rebecca say, "This is the man who spoke to me," he went up to the man who was standing beside the camels at the spring. This is very, to me, this is very obsequious.
Just to clarify, she was not wearing the nose ring at the time, or was she?
Yes, she was.
So how was it holding in?
Maybe it was a clip-on. I don't know. I doubt if he pierced her nose. They probably was a little clip-on. Come in, O blessed of God, of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Lavan didn't believe in Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, but he knew about him from Abraham, but he didn't choose to leave with him.
I'm just going to suggest something else, Peggy. Perhaps in those times, people, even young girls, deja had little holes in their noses. Today, with even young girls have holes in their ears. So maybe he could have placed the nose ring in a hole that was deja there.
It's possible because definitely all these holes are pagan. So they wore a lot of rings, earrings, and all these. Believe it or not, the Bible says we are not to have any piercings. So really, even pierced ears was a pagan ritual. You see now people with how many piercings everywhere, and it goes totally against the Torah. So you're probably right there. She probably already had holes from
Or I'm going to take that away and just say maybe they could clip it on, as you can clip on earrings too.
No, but what you said makes more sense to me.
Yeah, it makes more. It may make more sense, but we don't want to say that she had a pierced nose when she was not supposed to. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah,
Back.
but they don't know that yet. Remember, she was living. She wasn't living at the time when the Torah was written. This was written later. She was living among other people who were pagans.
Yeah, but some of the fathers, whichever, they followed the Torah even before it was like generally Semitic.
Some of the things, but remember Rachel. Rachel left with the idols of her father.
Right.
So they were very involved in paganism, and God was taking her out. He knew her character. So come in, O blessed of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. He said, "Why do you remain outside when I've made ready the house and a place for the camels?" So the man entered the house, and the camels were unloaded. Camels were given straw and feed, and water was brought to bathe his feet and the feet of the entourage with him. But when food was set before him, he said, "I will not eat until I've told my tale," he said. "Speak then." "I am Abraham's servant," he began. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh has greatly blessed my master. Yes, Richard.
Yeah, about the abstaining from eating thing.
Yes.
That is used by Orthodox Jews to have a bride and groom fast before weddings. Okay, so they will take their vows with a unintoxicated mind. All right, and so I'll just be quiet now.
Okay, I haven't heard that, but that's very interesting. I know he was probably very anxious to tell his story even more than to have food, which is just shows how eager he was because he was so excited at what God is doing. And he was telling that God is greatly blessed my master, who's become rich, giving him sheep, cattle, silver, gold, male, female slaves, camels, and donkeys. And Sarah, my master's wife, bore my master a son in her old age, and he has assigned to him everything he owns. Now my master made me swear, saying, You shall not get a wife for my sons from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I dwell. You shall go to my father's house, to my own family, to get a wife for my son. And I said to my master, But what if the woman does not follow me? And he replied to me, Yud-He-Vav-He, in whose ways I have followed, will send a messenger with you and make your errand successful. And you will get a wife for my son from my kindred. It's interesting how he repeats word for word. It's a message they want to get across from my father's house. Thus only then shall you be freed from my adjuration. If when you come to my kindred, if they refuse you, only then shall you be freed from my adjuration, from the things that I've ordered you. I came to the spring and I said, Oh God, Yud-He-Vav-He, God of my master, if you would indeed grant success to the errand on which I am engaged, as I stand by the spring of water, let the young woman who comes out to draw and to whom I say, Please let me drink a little from your jar, and who answers, Drink, and I will also draw for your camels. Let her be the wife whom the Lord has decreed for my master's son. I had scarcely finished praying in my heart when Rebecca came out. Rivka, with her jar on her shoulder, went down to the spring and drew. And I said to her, Please give me a drink. She quickly lowered her jar and said, Drink, and I will also water your camels. So here she's doing exactly what he had asked for. So I drank, and she also watered the camels. It's exciting to hear it again. I inquired of her, Whose daughter are you? And she said, The daughter of Bethuel, house of God, son of Nahor, brother of Abraham, whom Milcah bore to him. And I put the ring on her nose and the bands on her hands. Then I bowed low in homage to the Lord and blessed God, the God of my master's house, Abraham, who led me on the right way to get the daughter of my master's brother for her son. Now, if you mean to treat my master with true kindness, tell me. And if not, tell me also, that I may turn right or left. Then Laban and Bethuel answered. Bethuel was the father of Laban. The matter was decreed by Yud-He-Vav-He. We cannot speak to you bad or good. Interesting. They didn't believe in him, but they knew who he was. Here is Rivka before you. Take her and go. Let her be a wife to your master's son, as Yud-He-Vav-He has spoken. When Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed low to the ground before Yud-He-Vav-He. The servant brought out objects of silver and gold and garments and gave them to Rivka, and he gave presents to her brother, to Laban, and to her mother. And then he and the entourage under him ate and drank and spent the night. Next morning, he said, Give me leave to go to my master. Now, it had probably taken quite a long time, and they knew they had a long journey back, so they were eager to get going. And Isaac was alone. His mother had died. But her brother and her mother said, Let the maiden, the Na'ar, remain with us some 10 days. 10 days! Then you may go. He said to them, Do not delay me, now that the Lord has made my errand successful. Let me go, that I may go to my master. And they said, Well, let's call the girl and ask for her reply, which is amazing at that time. Then they called Rebecca and said to her, Will you go with this man? And she said, I will. So they sent off their sister Rebecca and her nurse along with Abraham's servant and his entourage. And they blessed Rebecca and said to her, Oh, sister, my sister, our sister, may you grow into thousands of myriads, which is exactly what has happened. May your descendants seize the gates of their foes, which is still to happen. Then Rebecca and her maids arose, mounted the camel, followed the man. So the servant took Rebecca and went his way. So we see she had maids, she had servants. They weren't poor. Isaac had just come back from the vicinity of Be'er Lahai Roi. This is where, remember the well, where what's her name? Hagar had heard from the angel of God. For he was settled in the region of the Negev. Now this is interesting. Sarah, we read at the beginning. Let me see if I wrote this. Sarah was she in Beersheba? Where did I do with it? I wrote my notes and now I can't find it. Yeah, here. Sarah died in Kiryat Arba. She was in Hebron after the binding of Isaac. Abraham settled in Beersheba. Sarah's in Hebron. Abraham's in Beersheba. Now she had Isaac when she was 90. And after the binding, he moved to the Negev. So all three of them were not living in the same place. They probably couldn't even look at each other after this. They were so upset. So imagine. So Isaac had just come back and he was in the Negev, which is in the south. Isaac went out walking in the field toward evening, and looking up, he saw camels approaching. Raising her eyes, Rivka saw Isaac. She got down from the camel and said to the servant, "Who is that man walking in the field toward us?" And the servant said, "That is my master." So she took her veil and covered herself. I suppose that this was a practice even back then in the cultures of the day. The servant, to me, it's a sign of humility. The servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Isaac then brought her into the tent of his mother, and he took Rebekah as his wife. Isaac loved her and thus found comfort after his mother's death. This, to me, dispels the whole Hollywood process of falling in love before you get married. It's the families who know who would be best for their children. She was brought into the tent of her mother Sarah. Sarah was gone. Isaac was comforted, and he loved her. He would be faithful to this woman. And here we see Abraham took another wife. Here he's 137, because Sarah's 127. He was 10 years older, we know, because when she had the baby, when she had Isaac at 90, Abraham was 100. So there was 10 years difference. But here he gets married again to Keturah. And here are the names of all the people who Keturah gave birth to, many of whom became enemies of Israel. Abraham willed all that he owned to Isaac. Same as he did to Ishmael, he sent the sons off. But here, Abraham's sons he had other sons. Look at this, not only to Keturah, by concubines. Abraham gave gifts while he was still living and sent them away from his son Isaac eastward to the land of the east. So we see that Abraham was a very busy guy, and he had a lot of offspring. The total span of Abraham's life was 175 years. Abraham breathed his last, dying at a good ripe age, old and contented. He had many, many, many children, as it was promised by God. And then he was gathered to his kin, those who went before him. His sons Isaac and Ishmael, they came together to bury him at the cave of Machpelah. They weren't enemies. In the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, facing Mamre, the field that Abraham had bought from the Hittites. There Abraham was buried, and Sarah his wife. After the death of Abraham, God blessed his son Isaac. Isaac settled near Be'er Lahai Roi, Again, that same place. And this is the line of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar, the Egyptian, Sarah's slave, bore to Abraham. And then you can go and read this on your own, all the sons. The years of Ishmael, he lived till 137, and he was gathered to his kin. And they dwelt from Havilah by Shear, which is close to Egypt, all the way to Assyria. So that's probably even today where the sons, the descendants of Ishmael live. So that's this story. It's so beautiful. There's so much to see and it's so much to learn. New? Mary, you're on mute if you wanted to say something. Well, we covered a lot, and we spoke a lot during during the reading. You know, I wrote here that Abraham's brother Nahor married Milcah. They had Bethuel, father Rebekah, and Laban. Laban means white, but we learn later that he's far from having a white, clean character. And God has a sense of humor. This story dispels the notion of falling in love before getting married. Abraham knew his family. He understood their customs. He knew that a young virgin maiden from this background could be taught morals, values, and principles if she was removed from her environment. That's why Abraham left his father's house with his entourage. Now Rebekah would leave her house with her entourage and be part of Isaac's household, and she would learn about the God of Israel. And that's what we need to do. Those of us who are called, like Abraham was called, to leave our father's homes and to learn what it means to follow the God of Abraham, Isaac, and later we'll read about Jacob. But when we do, our lives change. Our lives have hope, and it's a really a beautiful walk with God. And that's the story for today. As we say, that's the story, morning glory. Anything else to add
That
before we
makes,
close this portion?
Oops, sorry, what did I just do?
I hear you. I hear you.
Okay. You know, we were talking about Lord of the Rings and different kind of quest type of stories that people are so engaged in. And this is the ultimate of that kind of story.
Yes.
I mean, when I was reading that, I was thinking that feeling of being on the quest of all quests.
Yes.
Even in our own lives as well. It's like, it's so, it's very beautiful.
I would love these stories as they are written in the Torah and not interpreted by religions. I would love these stories made into movies and videos for people to watch. I mean, even imagine this. Later on, we'll read about the story of Mount Sinai, how Moses goes up and the mountain is shaking and trembling, and God is coming down and his voice is booming from the heavens, and he hands us the principles of life by which we could live. All humanity. Abraham was the father of all humanity. This is not meant only for Jews. It was given to Jews to disseminate to the rest of the world so that we could all live in peace. These stories are fabulous. And that's what we have to take away from these stories, that we all come from one family, from Adam and Eve to Noah, through Noah's children, and we're all related. We have to learn how to treat each other. And so with that, I will say goodbye from this part of the study, and then we can continue talking about some personal things that we may not want to record. So I say good night.
Brian is saying something.
Yes, Brian.
Shingles. I want to talk about shingles after.
This we'll talk about this after, okay? That's the after part. Okay, thank you, and I wish everybody a good night.
Thank you.
I hope that you tune in again next week. God willing, join our services, spread this word that the Torah is for everyone. And with that, we say good evening.
Good evening.